This section of this course and container is really offering a model to you known as the polyvagal ladder, as a way of helping you understand how emotions are living in your body and how old stuck emotions, i.e., trauma, can be activated and cause you to feel stuck in your life, stuck in overwhelm, stuck in anxiety, stuck in depression, stuck in certain conflicts or certain situations that keep arising in your life over and over again. Okay, this model was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, who I want to honor as one of my wise mentors as part of this section of the container. And I really offer this model to you because it's something that personally really helped me and massively, massively transformed my understanding of what has actually been happening up to this point in my life, where I look back on my life and feel like I have been stuck for a really long time and I didn't understand why. And this model really helped me to begin to untangle the confusion around this, and at the same time to let go of self-blame and this sense of shame that it had been my fault. Okay, so often we can be experiencing things like depression, fear, anxiety. We can be experiencing the same kind of conflicts coming up in relationships, even abuse that is a repeated pattern over the course of our lives. We can experience these things, which are painful enough as it is. And then what we end up doing is we layer on shame on top of it because we are carrying this story that it is our fault that this is happening to us, that somewhere along the line we have gone wrong, that we are broken. We should know better than this, but we don't. We don't seem to be able to figure this out. Okay, and so this model is really here to help you understand that your stuckness isn't you gone wrong. Your stuckness is actually a survival response from your body as a result of stuck emotions being in your body, which have not had the space or the process to finally come up and be released. Right? And so this is really a context that's going to help you be able to reframe what has happened in your life. Okay, and to let go of any blame, any sense of like, oh my God, I'm wrong. I'm stuck and I'm wrong and I'm dysfunctional. I'm malfunctioning. I can guarantee that no matter what you've been through, no matter what your experiences of life right now, that you are not malfunctioning when it comes to your body's perspective of what is happening. Okay. So this model is officially called the polyvagal theory ladder. Within my own healing modality, I like to call it your emotional landscape. And for me, that really speaks to this idea that your body is this extremely complex world, right? And there are many different landscapes inside your own body. You have this entire kind of universe inside of you where certain emotions and stories and memories are stored. Yeah. And by you going on this healing journey, you are coming back to your body and you are setting an intention to start exploring this emotional landscape that is inside of you, that has formed over the course of your life, which you may never have explored before. And this is an incredibly courageous and wonderful thing to be doing. And I find this image really helpful as well, because whatever you find inside of your body, whether you find deserts of like depression, or, you know, mountain ranges of fear, or, you know, whatever it is, whatever you find inside of your body, I want you to understand that these intense emotions and repeated cycles and patterns that appear in your life are the result of an accumulation of emotions and stories that never got looked at, that never got held, that never got accepted, that were never seen. Okay? And that's not your fault. Your stuckness is often not a choice. Your stuckness is a response to a perceived threat around you. And your body moves into stuckness when it's trying to preserve you, when it's trying to protect you, because it believes that the outside world, that your situation is dangerous, and it needs to protect you and stop you from moving forward. And this is where that feeling of stuckness can come from. It's a survival response, okay? Most, if not all, of my clients come to me saying they feel this level of stuckness in some way. And it can be really difficult for them to kind of articulate where that stuckness comes from. It's just this general feeling of stuckness. And looking at your emotional landscape is going to really help you understand what your stuckness is, where it's come from, why it's happened. Our emotional landscapes, i.e. our polyvagal theory ladders, are really relating and speaking about the story of our nervous system. Okay. We have nerves running across our entire body at a physical level. And these nerves are basically connecting our body to our brain. As you move through the world, the nerves that live in your body, under your skin, are picking up signals of what's around you. Okay? And those signals feel sensations, and they transmit those sensations as messages back up to your brain. And it's your brain that then interprets those signals and messages as certain stories and feelings and thoughts, right? And if you remember from my last video, I was really speaking about the fact that emotions are first and foremost sensations. And so the polyvagal theory ladder, our emotional landscape, is really here to help us come back to understanding the language of our body at a sensation level. So often when we feel anger or fear or sadness, we jump straight to the thoughts that it brings up in our heads, which are formulated from old stories, which are formulated from accumulated emotions and traumas. And what we really need to be doing is coming back to our body and understanding how our body and how our nervous system is actually functioning, and why certain thoughts and feelings and beliefs about the world keep coming up in our mind, okay, leading to this feeling of stuckness. So let's get into the actual emotional landscape ladder. Okay, I've attached an image of this as part of this course, and it may be really helpful for you to open that up and look at that image as I'm talking through this model for you. And don't worry if it doesn't all make sense right now, it hopefully will by the time I'm done explaining what's going on here. Okay, so hopefully you've got that opened up now and you can see an image of what is known as the polyvagal ladder, or your emotional landscape. This ladder is really here to help us understand the story of our survival. And not just your survival as an individual, but our survival as a human species. Our bodies and our nervous systems were designed to help us survive, especially, back in prehistoric days when the world was an extremely dangerous place and there were many threats everywhere. And we needed to be able to design a system of perception that would help us navigate the world and be able to sense when we were in danger so we could accordingly respond and help ourselves to be protected and preserved. Okay. And so that's really the context in which I want to speak to you about your nervous system. Because at the end of the day, we are human beings and we have an ancestral past, and we are all connected back to those prehistoric beings whose nervous systems were primed to appropriately respond to a world that was full of life-threatening danger. So you may have heard, many people have heard of what we call the fight or flight response. And this is part of your emotional landscape and this polyvagal ladder. So I want you to look at the very top section of this diagram. Okay. And the top section of this diagram will say something like the ventral state. When our body is situated at this point of our emotional landscape, we feel a sense of presence, we feel safe, we feel connected to the world, we feel able to play, and we feel able to experience joy. This top section of this ladder, of this landscape, is really where we're designed to be most of the time as human beings. Okay? We are designed, and our bodies are designed to be in a state of presence and play and joy most of the time. However, as human beings, we've been designed to be able to respond to threat and danger. Okay? So say, for example, in prehistoric times, a person is walking along, they feel safe, they feel connected to the world, but then they hear a rustling in a bush, and it suddenly puts them on alert. Okay. Some fear rises up. What happens at that point is that they start to move down this ladder into the next state, which is called the sympathetic state. They look around, and from the bush they see a saber-toothed tiger. And now suddenly, their nervous system has kicked them into a new state, which is called the sympathetic. And in this state, we are primed to respond to danger, to a perceived threat that feels life-threatening. So you may have heard of the fight or flight response. When we are in a state, a situation that feels extremely stressful and threatening to our well-being, to our bodies, we move into this state so that our nervous system can send signals back up to our brain to say, danger, 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 you need to run or you need to fight. You need to mobilize in some way to respond to the situation where it feels like you're about to die. Okay. And so this is what we may do, right? We may run away. This prehistoric person would run away from the tiger. And the idea is, and this is what our nervous systems were originally designed for, was that once we had been removed from the threat, our nervous system would be able to recover and come back up the ladder into the ventral state, and we feel connected again, we feel able to play again, we feel able to feel joy again. Okay, because what effectively would have happened is we felt fear coming up. Our nervous system would send that signal back up to our brain. Our brain would respond by saying, danger, run away. We would be able to act that out. We would be able to process that emotion and act on it, run away and resolve the situation. And therefore our nervous system would be able to come back up to a state of equilibrium, of balance, presence, and play. Our nervous systems are really only designed to be able to be in a stress response, an intense kind of stress response for about 10 minutes at a time. Now, in the prehistoric days, this worked, right? Unfortunately, we live in a time and in a society where we are exposed to stressful situations for a lot longer than 10 minutes at a time. Whether it's through feeling overworked, whether it's through stressful situations that feel very uncertain, that feel very unstable, whether we feel trapped in certain kind of situations within our social contexts, within our working contexts. Suffice it to say that our bodies are often exposed to levels of stress that last a hell of a lot longer than 10 minutes at a time. And if we are constantly feeling this state of stress, this is registering to our body as danger. And if our nervous systems are registering danger, sending the signal up to our brain, but we are not able to actually remove ourselves from the danger because it's a persistent level of stress that's kind of pervasive in our life, we end up moving down our emotional landscape into what's called the dorsal state. And this is another survival state, but it's a survival state that we turn to as almost like a last resort when our body was unable to process the stress and resolve a stressful situation in a way where we could remove ourselves from the danger. And at that point, when we get to this place of being exposed to prolonged stress and being unable to resolve that stress, we move down into the dorsal state, and the dorsal state is characterized by shutdown, overwhelm, feeling immobilized, playing dead. And we see this in nature, right? With the kind of most primal creatures, for example, fish. When they see a predator coming and they are unable to escape that situation, they'll flop over and pretend to be dead in the hopes that that predator may either not see them, may not notice them because they're not moving, may think that they're invisible, or in the context of, say, an antelope playing dead when a predator has it in its grip, hoping that the predator will kind of drag it away and leave it because it thinks it's dead, so that when the predator is turned away or has gone away to get more food, it can run away. Okay, so there's lots of reasons for why the playing dead strategy does work in nature as a as a preservation technique. And our nervous systems are designed in the same way, to turn to a state of shutdown and playing dead when it feels like we really have no other choice, when it feels like we have exhausted all other options and potentials for us to remove ourselves from danger. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because the truth is that if you are experiencing stuckness, if you are experiencing overwhelm, if you are experiencing the same patterns repeating over and over again in your life, whether that's conflicts, whether that's arguments, whether that's feelings of depression or thoughts that are depression, essentially, it is because what has happened is your nervous system, which was always designed to be at the top of this emotional landscape in the ventral, at some point in your life, likely in childhood, you were exposed to situations that felt dangerous. You were living with caregivers or parents who felt unpredictable, who felt dangerous in some way because they weren't able to see you, love you, or accept you for who you truly were. And in pushing down your own emotions because you couldn't resolve them at the time, you couldn't express them at the time, it didn't feel safe for you to express your emotions at the time, you were exposed to a prolonged level of stress. And that stress pushed your nervous system down into a dorsal state, a state of shutdown, a state of withdrawal, a state of overwhelm, a state of disconnection. And for many of us, we may actually spend so much time in this dorsal state that it becomes our default setting. We were always designed to be at the top of this ladder. But due to life, due to circumstances, due to traumas, due to the situations that surrounded us that felt dangerous, we may end up actually defaulting to the bottom of that ladder in dorsal state. And say, for example, this was your experience as a child, right? Maybe it didn't feel safe for you to express your emotions. Maybe the only way you could survive was to be invisible, to play dead, to act like you weren't even there, to accept the fact that you weren't going to be seen. We may end up, our nervous system makes that state our default. And without doing the healing work, we can grow up and move through our lives still in that state, still in that default state. Okay? That's not to say that you don't necessarily experience moments in life where you're in the other states, right? But when our nervous system has been so used to feeling shut down, overwhelmed, and stuck, we may find ourselves constantly and consistently returning to that dorsal state. And what does that look like? Well, firstly, it manifests in the body as certain sensations, right? It's different for everyone. And the next video that I'll be sharing with you is about how we can actually begin to map this out for ourselves so we can understand our nervous system and how our body is actually speaking, right? And how our nervous system is formed and how we can begin to speak to it, right? But some very kind of typical symptoms of being in a dorsal state are brain fog, inability to focus, lethargy, feeling overwhelmed, this sense of immobilization, of feeling just unable somehow to get moving, right? This doesn't happen because you're lazy. This isn't like a character defect. This isn't a malfunction. It's because your nervous system has defaulted to a survival state because at some point in your life, it felt dangerous for you to express, resolve, or release certain emotions. And in the face of prolonged stress and perceived threats in your life, your nervous system defaulted to a state of shutdown to try to preserve you. And said, well, it's better for you to spend your life in a cave rather than risking going out into the world and dying. Right? That's kind of what the language of your nervous system is essentially saying. So at one level, we feel it as sensations, physical sensations in our body. And at another level, we may experience the dorsal state through our thoughts, right? Thoughts like, life is hopeless. The world is hostile. I need to play small. I need to be invisible. It's not safe for me to be myself. I'm not welcome here. And so on and so on. We all have very unique flavors that we experience of this state. And it may sometimes be the case that you find yourself in extreme anxiety, this sense of kind of restlessness. That is because your nervous system is trying to move you up the ladder into sympathetic state, or you found yourself in sympathetic state and that's become your default setting. And actually your body is wanting to help you release something. It's wanting to help you to release an emotion so that you can move back up into a place of safety and presence and joy and play. And so it can be really helpful for us to look at the kind of the overarching themes of our life through this ladder, and to begin to look at our experiences of life through this ladder and through this emotional landscape. At any given point, you are inhabiting one of these states. There are also combined states, which is something we can explore together in our one-to-one sessions, if that feels relevant for you at this time. But at any given point, you are occupying some location on this emotional landscape. And it's really important for you to start to become aware of this, so that you can understand, okay, like, where is my body right now? What is the reality of my nervous system right now? What is the internal reality of my nervous system right now? And what in the outside world has activated that internal reality? These are really helpful things for you to be able to become more and more aware of, because that is how we begin to understand the language of our body. And we simply cannot heal without understanding the language of our body. Yeah. And so the next part of this course is really going to be about helping you to actually map out your emotional landscape. And I'm going to give you an example of that through mine, through my map. And you will have a reference to that ladder that I've been talking about. On it, there's some information about the flavors of each of these 3 states and how that may manifest in your life and through your body. Understand that these are kind of general themes and ideas. So your body and you as a person and a human with a story will experience your emotional landscape in slightly different ways. And so it's really important for you to start tuning in to what your emotional landscape is saying. This is a really important step of the healing process. Because the thing is, if we always just stay stuck up in our heads talking about the past, we remain disconnected from the actual emotional reality of our body. And we begin to move through life, we continue to move through life in a state of actually living in the past, rather than understanding that our nervous system is activating us into certain default states and ways of being because it believes we are in danger, even when we may not be in danger. Okay, and that is due to old stories that you have stored in your body due to old experiences where you were unable to resolve, express, or fully process an emotion that needed to be processed and moved out of your body. Yeah. So that is a bare bones explanation of your emotional landscape, which is modeled on the polyvagal ladder. Okay. The next video is going to be about how we can begin to map this out for ourselves. And hopefully in doing so, you can really begin to understand the nuances and details of your own emotional landscape. And honestly, this exercise and doing this and leaning into this as a practice is transformative. And it will naturally allow so many layers of shame to fall away. Because now you're starting to see that many of your emotions and feelings of stuckness are actually the product of your nervous system being in survival responses. Because your body is trying to protect you. And that means you are a functioning human being. Yeah. Another really important aspect of this is that when we begin to map this out for ourselves and understand each of the states and how we inhabit those states and what those states feel like for us, we can begin to start building somatic tools, to start building a toolbox of somatic practices that are going to allow us to speak to our bodies and help us move out of states and actually gain some fluidity rather than stuckness within these states. Because the aim isn't for us to always just be at the top of our ladder, right? Sometimes we are in stressful situations. Sometimes we are in situations where we need to respond to what's happening in the outside world, right? Where we need to mobilize or where we may need to withdraw. What we're really aiming for is for us to be able to move through the states with some fluidity. And there are certain somatic practices that we can begin to use that are going to help us to do that. Okay, but it begins with having some self-awareness about where in our emotional landscape we currently are from moment to moment. Amazing. Well, I will see you in the next video.